Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining me today for another presentation as part of the GreyLearning webinar series. Today focused on tracking photo locations using Lightroom Classic. A variety of different techniques essentially to keep track of where you captured your photos, which obviously serves a variety of different purposes. We'll talk a little bit about that as we continue on with this presentation today. And first and foremost, though, I just want to welcome you. Thank you again for joining me. And for those of you maybe not aware, I'm Tim Grey. I imagine most of you already knew that. I know many of you get my Ask Tim Grey email newsletter, which recently surpassed 19 years of publication. Hard to believe, in my 20th year of publishing the Ask Tim Grey email newsletter, where I answer a question from a photographer each weekday anyhow. So for those of you that don't get the email newsletter, if you're interested in adding one more email to your inbox each morning, in this case with information related to all things photography, then you can sign up at asktimgrey.com. And of course, I'll mention a couple of the GreyLearning courses that we've recently published. And we're also running online workshops. I'll give you some details of that at the end. But for me personally, part of the reason that I wanted to share my thoughts today on tracking photo locations is that for me, most of my photography, at least under normal circumstances, most of my photography involves travel. I'm normally traveling anywhere from 6 to 10 months out of the year, and so location is really a key aspect of my photography. In fact, many of you know that I tend to organize my photos in folders typically based on location, based on a trip to a particular location, because to me, the location is what defines the photography, so to speak. So when I think about my images, if you asked me for a particular photo of a subject, I would more than likely think about the location where I captured that image. And so location tends to be important, and it's interesting to me over the years when I, for example, first started leading photo workshops out in the Palouse region of eastern Washington state. The first time I visited the area, I didn't expect that I would have a second visit to the area, and so I didn't go to any trouble to track down or to note any of the locations where I photographed. And then when I went back the next year, I regretted not having some notes about some of the locations, where to find, that great red barn or the abandoned farmhouse and whatnot. So for me in particular, I've learned over the years how important it really can be to have the location details. And so I'll share a variety of different ways that you can go about that today, obviously. I see a comment from Howard that he's been reading every day, reads every day, the Ask Tim Grey email newsletter. Thank you for that. And then I also, before we get started, I do want to thank Tamron for making the GreyLearning webinar series possible by sponsoring these presentations. And if you haven't already, if you get a chance, go check out their YouTube channel, youtube.com/TamronVids. There's some really great videos there. Especially, I enjoy their sort of travel log where they're off to different places. They've got some really great videos that you might want to check out. And then I do encourage along the way, if you've got questions or comments for that matter, your screen should look, well, something like this. A little duplication probably at the moment, but if you look over on the right-hand side, you'll find a little question mark button, which you can click in order to expand the right panel there, where you can enter in your questions down at the bottom, and I'll be more than happy to address as many of those questions as I'm able during the presentation, in real time ideally. And of course, if you've got comments as well, feel free to share. Well, let's go ahead and dive in to tracking photo locations in a variety of ways using Adobe Lightroom Classic. And so we'll switch over now to Lightroom Classic and take a look at some of those various techniques, starting off in this case with a little bit of metadata updates for our photos. And so we're going to start off essentially with some of the more manual options that you could use to identify locations, but then I'll show you some really cool automated ways to track down the location where photos had been captured. And part of this just depends on the nature of the information that's important to you and how you need to be able to recall that information. So one of the simple options is to use metadata, of course, and so we'll talk about a few of the fields that you might consider updating, depending, of course, on exactly what it is that you want to track and how you share your photos, for example. I see Stephen's question here. If I'm using Lightroom Classic 10 today, and yes, this is with Lightroom Classic 10, although I would say that in this case, for today's presentation, there aren't any new features that are going to be covered here in terms of the work that we're going to do with location information. But yes, I am using Lightroom Classic 10. So the first field I want to talk about is the title field. So over on the right panel in the library module in Lightroom Classic, we have the metadata section. And within the metadata section, you can find the label field, which is part of the IPTC metadata, and title. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong field and then read the wrong name. The label is actually the color label, but the title field and the caption field as well. So title, you can think of as a brief description, and caption, which we'll look at as well, is caption is a longer description, essentially, generally speaking. At least that's the way they're defined in the metadata standards. But what's interesting about both title and caption is that these can be used to automatically include these details in a variety of ways when you're sharing photos from Lightroom Classic. So, for example, sharing an image to social media, you can use the title as the title and the caption as the caption. So, for example, if you post a photo from Lightroom Classic to Facebook with one of the published services, then you could have that information applied essentially automatically. And so that can be very helpful. And of course, if you submit to stock agencies, for example, you're generally going to be required to fill in a certain amount of metadata, and that often includes title and caption. And so at a very fundamental level, you could make reference to location information when you actually are updating metadata. And obviously, keywords are another consideration here as well. I would say title and caption are useful when you want to have a little bit of additional detail, essentially, available to you. So for me personally, I don't tend to add title and caption to every photo, to be sure, and typically only favorite photos that have made the cut after my editing review, and also photos where I feel that I'm going to want to remember details. And one of the key things about so much of the metadata that we're going to talk about today is that I think of it as going in two directions, serving two purposes. Number one is that I can search for a particular subject, for example, based on the metadata. So I could search the title field to look for a title that includes the location I'm looking for example, but also that metadata and much of the information that we'll talk about today can actually go in the other direction, where you find a photo and then you want to be reminded of details about that photo. And so, for example, if you looked at this photo, and I have this experience regularly where I think I'm going to remember something, and then I don't. One of the examples that comes to mind is, in Paris, the Eiffel Tower. I will remember the Eiffel Tower. I don't need to add a title referring to the Eiffel Tower. I can just look at the picture and know it's the Eiffel Tower. But of course, if I'm searching for the Eiffel Tower, then the title, the caption, the keywords, other metadata may be helpful. But then there's other structures. You may be familiar with the building with all the colorful plumbing on the outside, and you might not remember the name of it. Or you might know that it's the Georges Pompidou building, but I'm not sure I could necessarily spell Pompidou accurately. So these fields can be helpful both in terms of locating a photo when you do know what you're looking for, but reminding you also of the details of the photo when you maybe stumble upon a photo, for example. So we can just click into these fields, and I see the question here from Quentin. Will the title and caption be stored if you're not using XMPs? So yes, as with the metadata that we use elsewhere in Lightroom Classic, any of the updates you make to metadata in Lightroom Classic by default are only stored in the catalog themselves. And so if I update the title, that information stays in the catalog but does not go out to the source image file. But I'll briefly bring up the catalog settings dialog. If you go to the Lightroom Classic menu on Macintosh or the Edit menu on Windows, you can find catalog settings. And on the Metadata tab, I recommend turning on the option to automatically write changes into XMP, which means that metadata that is part of a metadata standard, essentially, so not custom features in Lightroom such as pick and reject flags or collections and virtual copies, but standard metadata, including title and caption, will then be written out to the original image. So the actual image file for most supported file formats, in the case of a raw capture, it would be to an XMP sidecar file. So I can just type in a title. Let's call this Jagged Peak in Mauritius, since that's the location where this photo was captured. So just a brief description, typing into that field, pressing enter or return on the keyboard in order to apply the change. And so now if I stumble upon this image, then I can be reminded if I forgot where this photo was captured, for example, or if there were other details, if it was the name of a building, for example, or some other detail, that I can search for that information to find this photo, or of course, if I stumble upon the photo for other purposes, I can be reminded of those details. And yeah, good question, Randall, about the difference between title and caption. The way these metadata fields are defined in the metadata standard, they're basically the same, meaning they are intended as a description of the subject matter in the image. The key difference is just length. Title is to be a short description and caption is to be a longer description. And so if you take a look at the size of the metadata field, in fact, it sort of indicates that to give you a little bit of an additional clue, that title is intended to be just a brief headline, and caption, think of as literally a caption of a photo, a little bit of a description, generally a sentence or two. All right, and speaking of caption, we can go take a look at an actual caption. Well, we can go take a look at a different photo to apply a caption to. I'm going to go to the Italy 2017 folder in this case and go find an image. This is late afternoon light and some clouds in the, let's see, in this case, this was the Alps near Mont Blanc, in fact. And so wonderful light. That only lasted just a few moments. In fact, just briefly, this was taken just shortly before the clouds opened up, and this wonderful light that did not last very long before the sun went down behind the mountains in the Alps near Mont Blanc, and this happens to be in Cordon, France. And so we can actually type a longer description, a more meaningful bit of information. So, I might also type a title here as well, so I'll call this Late Afternoon in the Alps, for example. And then the caption, we'll try that again. I'll just paste to save myself some typing. I copied from a document and pasted in here, and once again pressing enter or return on the keyboard in order to apply those changes. All right. And yes, label I did mention accidentally, so I see the label which sounds, and apparently I confused myself as well, but that color label is what label field is. So the label field, it sounds like you would type a word, and you sort of do, except it relates to a color label. So if I press the number 6 on the keyboard to assign a red color label, you'll see the word red appear. So it sounds like that would be a title, a variation on a title. It's actually the color label field. Hopefully at some point, Adobe will add the word color, even though technically the label field is not intended purely for colors. That's just a sort of a standard that has been developed over time, updated, I guess you could say. A common practice. And great question. So can you copy and paste the metadata into similar photos? Yes, absolutely. And so in this case, for example, let's just copy that late afternoon in the Alps title, for example. And there are several ways that we could go about this. I'll select these several images, 5 images here in a row. The way I typically approach this is to select the images, but then make sure to switch into the grid view display. When you're working in the loop view display, which you can get to by pressing the letter E on the keyboard, you're only actually working with a single image. You can synchronize. There's some synchronization options over on the right panel. The sync button, for example, enables you to synchronize selected fields from one image to another. But what I find easier, at least if you anticipate this in advance, is to select multiple photos, go to the grid view display, And then you can update the information for all of those photos. So for example, if I paste that title, late afternoon in the Alps, into the title field in this case. So keep in mind that in this case, I have updated the title for 5 photos selected all in the grid view, but I've only updated the caption for one of those photos. So now as I navigate among the images, you'll see this one has a title and the caption. The others in this little sequence only have the title. So we can update multiple images all at the same time by selecting them in the grid view and then making the applicable updates over on the right panel. All right, so let's talk about keywords as well, which is another handy piece of metadata. And I would say that keywords are especially helpful in a broader sense, meaning that it's not just about the brief details of a single photo. And so, we have the title and the caption where we're describing the photo and usually just the key details. With keywords, we can get a little bit more sophisticated, essentially. And so we can not only describe, for example, what's the name of this place, or, you can describe what the weather was like, what the season was. You can describe the mood, the dominant color. You can essentially add details, add random details, whatever it is that you can think about for a photo that you might want to remember or you might want to search for. And so, if I were writing a title, then I might just say, maybe you'd call this the skyline, if you will, but the skyline of Rovinj, Croatia. Whereas for keywords, I might add buildings and bell tower and water and sky and clouds and all sorts of other information into the keywords. So I'll scroll up a little bit on the right panel here so we can get to the keywording section. And here we have the ability to just simply add keywords. So I can click into the click here to add keywords field, making sure that we're in enter keywords mode for this keywording section. And then we simply type keywords separated by commas. And so this is especially helpful, I think, for details that you want to remember and you're worried you're going to forget, or you might want to be able to search for. So certainly, I think I would probably remember that this image was captured in Croatia. And so I could add Croatia as a keyword, and it was on the Istrian Peninsula. So I might type Istria, for example. But what about the town? It's probably going to be a lot more difficult for me to remember the name of the town, and especially how to spell the name of the town. So I actually had to look it up, how to pronounce the name of several of the towns, and I actually talked to somebody from Croatia and asked them later how to pronounce those towns, because I had the details, the spelling, but I didn't know how to say them. And so this town is called Rovinj, a beautiful, cute little town if you ever get a chance to visit Croatia. And it is spelled Rovinj. And so not necessarily for a native English speaker what I would think of as obvious spelling for the image. But again, keeping in mind that we can select multiple photos in order to update those details for all of the images at once. And so, again, being able to add keywords to multiple photos, I'll go copy these keywords that I typed in for one image, and then I can essentially just paste the keywords, and those will now, I'm in the grid view, so don't fall prey to the grid view snafu. Don't forget to put those images into the grid view so that now we can actually paste the keywords and apply them to multiple images all at one time. So very handy technique to be able to streamline your workflow a little bit. And of course, there's other ways that we can add keywords. You can use a keyword painter. There's a variety of options that are available. But the point is, in this case, to use those keywords to remind yourself of particular details about the location, which includes, again, not only the name, but, the spelling sometimes can be important. And even more general details such as, coast, if it's, a town on the coast and that sort of thing, so that you can remember those details. And also, what was the name of that town on the coast of Croatia? Well, I could search then coast and Croatia, for example, in order to track down those images. But then we can also take things a step further in terms of keywording so that we can track down our photos and possibly share those photos in a more streamlined fashion when it comes to additional details about the location, about how we are tracking down the location information for our photos. And so one of the options available is to add hierarchical keywords, hierarchies of keywords. And so, for example, this photo of a red barn out in the Palouse, this barn happens to be located in the town of Uniontown, and Uniontown is in Washington State. And so I know that if this photo was captured in Uniontown, I know that the photo was also captured in Washington State. And I also know that it was captured in the United States and in North America. And so we could actually use hierarchical keywords, so I can just identify this as Uniontown, and the other keywords sort of come along for the ride automatically. And so I'll go ahead and create a keyword. And for hierarchical keywords, I recommend working on the keyword list. And so we'll go to the keyword list section over on the right panel here in the library module, and I'll click the plus button over to the left of that heading in order to add a keyword. And so in this case, we'll start off with the top level keyword. And generally, if you're using hierarchical keywords, I think it's good to start with a category. And so instead of starting with the top level location, I might start with location as the name of that top level keyword, basically to give a little bit of a heading and to help categorize my hierarchical keywords. We'll talk about synonyms momentarily. We can choose whether or not we want to include a keyword on export. And what that means essentially is if you had a keyword that was private, let's say you photograph a model, you put the model's name or contact information as a keyword, you could turn off the include on export so that even if you include the metadata when you export photos, the keywords that have that checkbox turned off will not be included. Export containing keywords means that if you export a photo with keywords, that all of the keywords in the hierarchy will be included. Synonyms we'll talk about in a moment, but we can choose whether or not we're going to export synonyms. We can identify if it were a person, which would not relate to a location-based keyword, and we can even add to the selected photos. So if I had selected several photos, for example, first, I could add this keyword to those images. I won't worry about that at the moment. I'll just click the Create button, and then we can scroll down our list here and find our location keyword. And so that at the moment is, well, it's just a normal standalone keyword, so that I could add that as a keyword. This is a location. That's not necessarily the best keyword I can imagine, but it's just the starting point for a hierarchy. And so the next step is to create that hierarchy. So inside location, I could put, for example, the United States, or I could put North America, depending on how I want to structure my overall location hierarchy. So I'll right-click, and then we can choose to create a keyword tag inside of location, meaning in a hierarchical relationship with location. So I'll just start at the country level in this case. And so I could type United States of America. And then synonyms. So this is a good opportunity to talk about synonyms for keywords. These synonyms can be included when I export. If we turn on that Export Synonyms checkbox, they also are considered synonyms in the context of searching. And so what if I try to search for USA, for example, rather than United States of America? And so I could add additional synonyms, different words that essentially mean the same thing. So if I were adding airplane as a keyword, you could say plane, or something to that effect. So a word that essentially means the same thing, bicycle and bike, for example, and then you can search and export those keywords equally as if they were the original keyword, for example. And so I'll leave all those other options the same. Notice that we have that put inside location checkbox that's on by default since I right-clicked and chose the option to create a keyword inside of another keyword. And so I'll create that. And now notice that we have a triangle to the left of location that is solid rather than dotted. That means that there's something underneath. I can click that triangle and go find United States of America, right-click, create another keyword tag inside. We'll call this Washington State. And I suppose I could put WA as the abbreviation as a synonym, for example. And then inside of Washington State, we could put Uniontown. And maybe you had a nickname for a town or something like that. You could add that as a synonym as well, and then create. And so now I could select multiple photos, for example. Remember to get into the grid view display. And if I go down to Uniontown, I'll turn on the checkbox to add Uniontown as a keyword. And effectively, not literally, but effectively, you are adding those parent keywords as part of that process. So if we go back up to the keywording section, we'll see that Uniontown is added as a keyword, but not Washington State, United States location. But remember, I chose that option to export synonyms, and so when I export these photos with metadata included, those synonyms will come along for the ride as though they were keywords. But also, remember, I mentioned that we needed to be in Enter Keywords under the keywording section to update these keywords. We also have an option to show keywords and containing keywords. And so we'll see here an indication of that essentially hierarchical structure where we have location. We have, now note that the keywords are listed here in alphabetical order, so you're not necessarily seeing them in the order of the hierarchy, of course, but we have location, so it was Uniontown, Washington State, United States of America, and the location as the top level there. And so admittedly, using the hierarchical keywords in Lightroom Classic, it can be a little bit tricky. It gets things to be a little bit more complicated, a little more convoluted perhaps, but it also gives you better control over your keywording and it streamlines some aspects. So it's sort of more complicated to set up, but it can be easier to set up in terms of just assigning that child keyword to the images. See the question here, do the keywords go to XMP if enabled? Yes, the keywords do, but the synonyms do not. That would just be an option with the images when you export them. And yeah, it's a good point, Eric. You'll notice I have a keyword here with an asterisk at the end of it, in this case, Instagram share. So note that I have selected multiple images because I was adding a keyword to multiple photos, again, making sure to be in the grid view for that, and we're seeing a list of keywords for the selected photos. So location is a keyword, Uniontown is a keyword, Washington State, for all of these images. The asterisk after Instagram share indicates that that keyword is not assigned to all of these photos, but it is assigned to some of these photos, in this case, just one photo. So if I switch to that single photo, then you'll see these are the keywords assigned to this image, and we have a slight variation for the other images. All right, and let's take a look here. Yeah, so grid view versus loop view, again, letter G on the keyboard for grid view, letter E on the keyboard for the loop view. And the difference is just, are we looking at thumbnails for our photos, which is the grid view, or a single image at a time, which is the loop view? And by default, again, even if you have selected multiple photos, so we have a crop duster here, for example, several photos of the crop duster. And so if I select those several photos and add crop duster as a keyword, I've actually, at the moment, only updated a single image. So if I go to these other images, you'll see there is no crop duster keyword for those photos. I could, once again, synchronize. So I could select multiple photos, update a single image, and then synchronize and choose which details to synchronize. But I think it's far easier to select multiple images, but then be sure you're in the grid view so that you're actually updating the metadata for those multiple photos. Of course, also be sure to keep in mind that you've selected multiple photos and you're in the grid view, that you are updating. In some cases, of course, you don't want to update multiple photos at a time. All right, and then I do want to show some options that relate to the map, of course. One of the, I think, incredible features of Lightroom Classic. Now, I'm a little biased, admittedly, because for me, location information is often so very important in terms of keeping track of the details of where a photo, being able to recall the location that a photo was captured. And so there's a variety of reasons that those details are helpful to me personally. So I'm certainly biased, but I do find the map module to be just absolutely incredible. And so I'm going to browse all photos in this little sample catalog, and then we will go to the map module, but not just any map in any location in the map module. I'm actually going to let's go to the location where we'll switch to the loop view display where this photo was captured. And I can do that very easily. So of course, up on the top panel, we have the module picker here. We could choose the map module, but in some cases, your photos will have location information embedded in metadata automatically. GPS coordinates automatically embedded in metadata. This is absolutely wonderful. If that happens, then you'll see this little badge, as long as you have those badges enabled, but this little sort of a push pin badge, the leftmost badge here at the bottom right corner of the thumbnail for the image, that little push pin badge indicates that this photo has GPS coordinates embedded in metadata. And I can actually go to this photo on the map in the location where it was captured simply by clicking on that little push pin. So instead of going to the map module and searching around, I can basically ask Lightroom Classic, hey, where was this photo captured? I'll click the button there, and that will take me to the map module, and we can see the location where this image was captured. So we've got push pins on the map here, essentially. The numbers indicate how many photos. And of course, the push pin, the position of the push pin on the map, indicates the location where the photo was captured. And so I took 10 photos over here, and I took 60 photos over here, and 4 photos over there, and there's some photos in other nearby locations around Steptoe Butte. So this is from the top of Steptoe Butte. And so I can see where the images were captured. I can also zoom in. So I've got some map controls down at the bottom here, one of which is the zoom control. So I can zoom in on the map, and as I do, we should see that these push pins will change so that they don't represent a single spot. As I get closer and closer, there we go, I see that that pin that was representing multiple photos in a single location, 60 photos in this case, in one location. As I get closer, I'm getting more detailed, a closer look at the map, and you'll see that those push pins will start to spread out to show with greater precision where I actually captured those photos. And so if you would like to capture this photo that I had selected initially, you can go exactly to that spot and capture that image. And when we click on one of the push pins, by the way, we'll not only be able to go see the image, that image will become selected on the film strip at the bottom, but we can also view thumbnails. So we've got these navigation controls on the pop-up, and we can go left and right through the various images that were captured at that particular location. So each of these locations will be able to see the photo that was captured from that location. And in this case, by the way, searching or viewing images across my entire Lightroom catalog. In this case, it's a demo catalog. My real catalog has 400 and some odd thousand photos in it. This one just about 4,000, but for the entire catalog. And that's because I initially chose that all photographs option from the catalog section at the top of the left panel in the library module. And so then I can go to the map and view all of my images on the map. Well, how did this happen? Completely and wonderfully automatic. And so zooming out on the map here and browsing the full map, pressing Shift-Tab on the keyboard to hide the panels temporarily, and we can see all of these photos plotted on the map from a wide variety of different locations, and all of those details of where the photos were captured, that was taken care of completely automatically by virtue of the camera that I was using. And so if you use a camera that includes a built-in GPS receiver, then the photos will appear on the map completely automatically. And so we could browse the map and go locate images directly on the map based on where they were captured. And how you accomplish this is to make sure that your camera has a built-in GPS receiver, which is a wonderful important reason, as we're approaching the holidays. If you're looking to buy yourself a gift or have somebody buy a gift for you, you want a new camera, I would certainly say there's tremendous value in buying a camera, choosing a camera that has a built-in GPS receiver. It was actually one of the top features on my list when I bought the camera that I'm currently using. And so to me, it's incredibly valuable, and the map is very helpful in a variety of reasons, and I'll show you some additional examples of that momentarily. But for example, we can switch. Now notice this is the Google map, so we're seeing Google Maps here, and if I just select one image, for example, I could actually go look at my metadata. So over on the right panel here, we have the metadata section in the map module, and we can pull up the GPS coordinates where that photo was actually captured, the elevation or altitude. So I was apparently at about 143 feet above sea level, and my camera was pointing northeast. And of course, these numbers might not mean a whole lot to you necessarily. I don't imagine that you would realize from those numbers necessarily that this was in is this doubtful sound? One of the sounds. Now I've forgotten which one, so thank goodness I can zoom in on the map and find out. But we could look at those coordinates. We can also copy and paste these coordinates into Google Maps in your web browser if you wanted to use Google Maps to explore that location, for example. And so we can track down the location information. And again, if you've got a camera with a built-in GPS receiver, or if many cameras, well, some cameras anyway, support accessory GPS receivers. And so you can make use of one of those options so that most of your photos will then have location information embedded into metadata. And of course, that does require that your camera have a clear view of the sky, essentially, so that if you're indoors, generally speaking, the GPS signal will not be picked up. If you're outdoors, and typically if you go outside, it'll take a minute or two, depending on your camera, for the satellite signal to be acquired so that you can actually then have the metadata embedded. And most cameras or accessories that support GPS will give you an indication. So for example, the GPS indicator might flash while it's still searching, and then it goes solid once you have a good signal. And I have been known to wait to capture my photo until GPS is active so that I can make sure, as long as I'm not going to lose my light or lose my subject, so that I can make sure that I have location information embedded in metadata for the photos. Now, of course, many of you may not have a camera with a built-in GPS receiver or with an accessory receiver or a camera that supports one. And so there are certainly other options available, and I'm going to share a few of those. We'll start off with a visit to Italy from before I had a camera with a built-in GPS receiver, and I captured this photo of the Duomo in Florence. And of course, even now, well, granted, I don't think I'm likely to forget what this subject is or where this subject is, but still, I like to be able to keep track. And there have been times when I have desperately searched around on a map trying to figure out where I captured a particular photo so I could document it for posterity when I had used a camera before I had a GPS feature built in. And so in that case, I've got the picture here of the Duomo, several pictures of the Duomo. I can go back into the map module and I can take advantage of a few additional features here. And so I can search the map. So up at the top right of the map, we have the ability to capture to search for the details about a particular photo. And so I'll go ahead and type in Florence, Italy, for example, and press enter or return on the keyboard. And that will enable me to search for Florence and then navigate around on the map. So once again, if we zoom in, I can get closer, and then I can click and drag on the map in order to pan around. And if you visited Florence, you may be familiar with the location where the photo of the Duomo was captured. That was Piazzale Michelangelo. And you can see it's right about at the center of the map. And I can zoom in, and we've got some details here, but I'm not sure exactly what is what necessarily. Where is the reasonably precise location where I captured this photo? And so I could switch map views. And so at the bottom left, just like Google Maps, we have the default road map. There's also a satellite view, which of course is a satellite view of the location that we've selected. There's also my favorite, the hybrid view, which is satellite view with the roads and details overlaid on top of the map. There's also a terrain view, which certainly can be helpful when there's terrain considerations. Here, I'll zoom out a bit and we can see some of the terrain around Florence. There's a light version of the map, shades of gray essentially, and a dark version of the map as well. So I typically, if I'm looking for a location that I know, I typically use the road map because it's kind of a cleaner map essentially. But then when I want more details, and especially that satellite view, then I'll switch to hybrid view. And so in this case, I think hybrid view will be my best bet. I can track down where is Piazzale Michelangelo. And in this case, I actually captured the image from this top left corner. And so now I can take the images that were captured from that location. So here there's 4 of them. I can select these photos on the film strip. Notice that the GPS field over on the right panel is empty, but I can still add those location details, and I don't need to know the GPS coordinates. I can simply point to any of these selected images and click and drag and drop them right onto the map in the applicable location. So you'll see I get a little push pin for my mouse pointer there, and I can drop the images. And when I do, if you take a look, we've got those GPS coordinates based on the position I dropped the images onto the map. Of course, I don't get the altitude. Technically, I should be able to determine the altitude, the elevation, if we assume, because Google Maps does know the elevation of points on the map, but of course that assumes that we were actually on the ground. The camera was on the ground, in fact, not being held on a tripod, not a drone flying up in the air, for example. And of course, we also don't know the direction that the camera was pointed when the photos were captured. And then another approach, kind of a hybrid approach that I have used over the years, is to use what I refer to as location snapshots. And so we'll go ahead and switch to the map view here momentarily. I'll clear out that search for Florence. And I have, well, let's go look at the library so you can actually see the photo. I have a photo here that does not have GPS coordinates in its metadata. And I have a photo next to it that does. So you can see once again that little push pin at the bottom right of the thumbnail. We do not see that push pin for the image on the left here. This was captured with a digital SLR that does not have a built-in receiver, whereas this photo was captured with a camera that does have a built-in GPS receiver. And a handy little trick, this photo was actually captured with a smartphone. And so most of us, I think, have smartphones, and for the most part, they've got GPS built in, and enabled typically, and so you can actually capture a location snapshot, a reference photo. So in Piazzale Michelangelo in Florence, Italy, you could take a reference photo that shows the foreground of where you're standing as well as the Duomo in the background, and then you can, of course, take your quote-unquote real photos and then reference the two. And so here's a photo that lacks GPS coordinates, but you can see it's obviously captured at the same basic location as this photo with GPS coordinates. So let's go to that location on the map. I'll once again click the push pin on the photo that has GPS coordinates so that I can be taken to the map in the particular location where this photo was captured. This would suggest that either the satellite view is not totally up to date or that the GPS was not totally accurate, and I would say it's the latter in this case. The location on the map is slightly off, and that does happen from time to time in terms of the accuracy, depending on how many satellites have been picked up, obstructions, how long it's been since the device was activated, etc. And so this photo is actually a little bit off in terms of the location. Let's see if satellite view actually shows us. No, it looks like, well, this probably is the platform, but the 5 fingers, you can see the reference here. It's this observation deck that was shown. This puts you out, jutting out over the air of the Alps, overlooking the little town of Hallstatt in the Austrian Alps. And so it looks like this is that location, so that's where it's plotted on the map. And so I'm guessing, based on the trail here, that that's the actual spot. They just don't have a photo that includes the little platforms there. But once again, I've used that location snapshot to get to the basic location. I can then, of course, sort of validate that information and update accordingly. And then when I found the correct location on the map, I can drag and drop the applicable photo right into position on the map so that I get those additional details. And note, by the way, that if you could type in location information, it's one of the other details available in metadata, but Lightroom will actually also, with the option to do what is essentially an address lookup, you can have those details displayed automatically. So notice, as soon as I put GPS coordinates by virtue of dragging a photo to the map, it shows me the actual GPS coordinates of that position on the map, but I also see that this is, well, it's not in the city, but it's considered the city of Obertraun in Oberösterreich or Upper Austria, and so I can see those details in the metadata as well. And the fact that they're italic means that these are just temporary. They're not actually in metadata. They're suggested address information, essentially. All right, and I know, let's see, we've got a few questions here. Stephanie, I'm not sure which image was showing Rome, Italy. I suspect, well, theoretically it would have been the photo of Florence, Italy, but I'd have to see where that was to see if there was something that was in error. But also, this is a demo catalog that I use for demonstration purposes, so it's altogether possible there's some inaccurate information within the catalog. And John is indicating that the drag and drop does not work accurately when using a 4K monitor and scaling up the text in Lightroom. Is there a fix? I actually was not aware of that apparent bug, and so I do not know if there is a fix for that. I'll have to look into that. And let's see. Okay, so we'll go back to the metadata section. So I believe, let me collapse this. It'll be a little bit faster. And if we were looking at, let's see, that was the photo out of curiosity here. I'm not seeing Rome, but maybe there was something else going on. If you know exactly where it was, I'd be curious, Stephanie, just to see if there was some other weird issue going on. In the meantime, though, I want to show you another cool option in terms of tracking down the locations for your photos in a sort of a hybrid automatic way. So I mentioned if you've got a camera that has a built-in GPS receiver, then you can have that location information embedded in metadata automatically. And so that is a great option, obviously. It's something that I'm very happy to have. But you can also use another approach that is a very similar variation on a theme, and that is to record a track log. And so you can use a variety of different tools in order to record a track log, including a great option is using a smartphone app. And so, for example, I happen to use an iPhone, and so I use an app called GPS Tracks for recording track logs. For Android users, one of the options that I've used that works well is called A-GPS Tracker, so a GPS Tracker for Android. The GPS Tracks app, I believe it's about $5 or so, but I found that it works wonderfully well for recording track logs. And the idea is that you launch the app, you start recording a track log, and you continue on your merry way, wandering around town photographing, for example. And what the track log is doing, based on GPS, of course, is tracking your location along with the time. And so it'll be at a set interval. It usually defaults to something like every 15 seconds a location is noted, and then it will interpolate on the map. You can adjust the frequency. And so let's say every 15 seconds it makes a note of your position. And so you've got this log that relates time to your location. And then, of course, as you're wandering around town, you capture various photos, like these delicious donuts, and your camera knows what time the photo was captured. And so you can then synchronize your track log with the photos to add location information to the photos essentially automatically. Okay, not entirely automatically, but with very little effort on your part. And so you can record that track log. Again, I use an app on a smartphone to record a track log. And then usually these apps have some method of sharing. So for example, you could email the track log to yourself, and it's typically a GPX file. There's a couple of different file formats, but GPX is one of the more common. And so you can email that to yourself, for example, and then I recommend saving the track log in the same folder as the photos that the track log relates to. So here, for example, I have some photos that were captured in Austria on a trip to Austria in 2012. And so within that folder containing the photos from that trip, I would also put the track log. I would save the track log file into that same folder location so that it's easier to reference. And so for these photos, which as you can see do not have GPS location information embedded, you can see the lack of that push pin, or when we look in the metadata section, the GPS section will be empty. And I'm going to change that. And in this case, these photos that I'm referencing happen to have been captured in the city of Graz in Austria. And so I could navigate to that location on the map, of course, but in this case, I'll essentially do that automatically by loading my track log. So on the toolbar down at the bottom of the map display, there's this little track log button, and I can click that button and choose the option to load a track log. So that will bring up a dialog, and it is already in the folder, but I can navigate to the folder that I've saved that track log file into, and then select the track log. Once again, you can see it's a GPX file. And then I'll click the Choose button down at the bottom right, and my track log is loaded onto the map. And so you can see the path that I wandered apparently rather aimlessly and haphazardly for the most part around Graz, Austria. And so for part of that, actually, you'll see these random straight lines over here. I actually made a stop at the hotel to pick up something I had forgotten, and so the location information was a bit erratic for parts of that. But this is the route that I traveled around Graz, capturing some photos. And if you hover your mouse over that track log, you'll see the time that the photos, well, not necessarily photos in this case, but at least the track log. In this case, I was photographing. And so the track log reflects the time where I was at a given location. I can assure you I was not out photographing at just before 4:30 in the morning. Rather, I had neglected to update the time zone on the GPS device used to capture this track log, and so the information is not accurate. But fortunately, I can fix that. And so with the track log loaded and showing on the map, I can click once again on that track log button down at the bottom below the map, and then I can set a time zone offset. And I'm going to actually first select the range of images, just so I can show you another little nice feature here. So I'm going to click on the first image captured during this little track log recording, and then hold the Shift key and click the last image. And I will click the pop-up, once again for the track log, and now I'm going to set a time zone offset to correct the capture time, if you will, for the track log. And you'll see that for my selected photos, there are 7 of them, these images were captured on January 19th, 2012, in a range between 1:06 p.m. and 1:25 p.m. The track log was supposedly recorded between 4:23 a.m. and 7 a.m. That is not accurate, but I can shift the time, the offset for that track log. Notice that the track log range is shown in red, and that is because the photos do not fall within the range of time for the track log. There is a mismatch here. In this case, I happen to need a 7-hour correction, so I'll shift to plus 7 hours in this case because the device was set to an earlier time zone. So plus 7 hours, you can see now that the ranges align with each other, and so I can click OK in order to apply that offset. That doesn't actually change the time shown on the map, by the way. If you hover, it's still showing the original time. I've just applied an offset. So unfortunately, it's not really obvious, not necessarily really clear that you've applied it, but we don't need to worry about it for very long because we're now going to synchronize these photos with that track log. So again, the time from the photo will be matched up with the time for the track log, and that will determine the position on the map. And so to do that, I'll click our track log pop-up once again, and now I'm going to choose the option to auto-tag the 7 selected photos. So if I hadn't done so already, I need to select the images that I want to apply the location information to, and then choose this command from the menu, and those photos magically appear on the map. I can, of course, zoom in and take a closer look and maybe verify. So, for example, here's a couple of photos taken near the art museum, and so I can click and see the thumbnail, and this happens to be a bridge that the trolley is going across, and there's a bell tower of a church here with a copper dome. And if I zoom in a little bit closer, here is the bridge in question, and just across the bridge there is that copper dome. And so we can essentially validate the location where a given photo was captured. So in this case, a couple of photos taken nearby each other of that same bridge. And so again, a sort of, I guess you could say, semi-automatic option for adding location information to your photos. And then one last little feature I want to show you, and I'll try to address some of the additional questions, as many as we can here before we run out of time. But when you're using those locations, so I've switched to all photographs so I can see all images, and there will be, of course, locations on the map that you'll reference. And what I find, if I, in fact, zoom out on the map here, I find that very often just browsing the map is helpful for me in terms of finding photos. Sometimes because I know where a photo was captured. Maybe I know that I captured an image on the island of Sardinia, for example, in Italy, and so I could zoom in and track down, try to find that photo captured on the island of Sardinia. In other cases, of course, I might not remember. I might not be looking for a particular photo, and I might just browse around the map and just kind of pan around and be reminded of particular photos. Oh yeah, I forgot, about such and such a location, in this case, Crete, I believe. But so I'll often just browse the map. But I think you'll also find if location is of value to you, so to speak, in your photography, I think you'll also find that there are certain locations that are especially important to you, or that are more common, that you're going to like the photos in that area or want to see the photos in that area. And so, for example, I can zoom in on the map and head over closer to Naples and go find the island of Capri. As we saw earlier, of course, I could also search for the island of Capri, but we can then also create a saved location. And so over on the left panel, we have a saved location option, and to the right, there's a little plus. I can click the plus and then add. In this case, I already have a Capri, Italy location saved, and I have a Graz location saved, but I'll make another Capri location. And so I'll just leave this called Capri, and we can create folders to organize our various locations. So you could organize these by continent or some other criteria, or just use the My Locations option. So I can give it a name. And of course, since this is the map knows which location I'm looking at, and so that becomes the default. I can adjust the radius. So how big or small do we want that radius to be? In other words, which area defines this particular location? I'll show you a couple other options for changing that in a moment. And the idea is that then I can go to the photos from Capri very easily by accessing my saved location. And so that can be a handy option as well, sort of a supplemental option for that location information. And you can also make it private, which means that any photos that are inside of a private location, when you export them, even if you export with metadata, the location metadata will be excluded. So for example, you could create a private location for your home or your office or whatnot. So I'll leave that set as it is and click Create. Notice that I do have a couple of controls a little bit hidden here, but there's a dot in the center of my circle and a dot on the outer edge of my circle. I can adjust, so let me zoom out so I can get to the edge of that more easily. I can drag inward or outward to adjust the size, the radius of my circle defining the location, and I can grab the center point, click and drag to adjust the overall position so that, for example, my location is defined with a little bit more precision. Maybe make that a little bit larger. And so now those photos have been designated as photos captured in that saved location. And again, I can access that saved location at any time, including this little search arrow on the right-hand side. I can click in order to search, in effect, for the photos captured in that location. So here, photos that have been captured in Graz in Austria, for example. All right, so there you have it. Quite a few options, obviously, needless to say, for getting your photos, getting the location information sort of preserved for your photos in the context of the map. And so we'll take a look and try to address as many questions here as possible. And in the meantime, by the way, this is the mapping features, the location details are just one of the many, many options for organizing your photos in Lightroom Classic. And during the first 2 weeks of December, I'm actually going to be presenting an online workshop, so a virtual classroom, much like this here live demo, where students can get their questions answered in real time or via follow-up email. And so if you're interested in learning to organize photos in Lightroom Classic using Lightroom Classic 10, the latest version of Lightroom, you can point your web browser at timgray.me/December 2020. And let's see. A real good question in terms of the battery power. So the GPS tracking, my experience has been that in general, using the GPS feature cuts your battery life about in half. Now, this definitely varies on a number of factors, including the frequency with which you're tracking location information. But on my SLR, it's around about half. The other issue with the GPS feature on many cameras, and this is the case on my camera, is that the GPS is active even when the camera's turned off. And so I don't want to turn off GPS because then I might forget to turn it back on. My solution is to eject the battery from my camera when I put it away. And hopefully it becomes pretty obvious if I haven't put the battery back in pretty quickly. But that way, because literally within a week of putting my camera, in the closet and not using it, that battery will be dead, even if the camera was never turned on. And as a reminder, the question here, Crystal's asking about the TrackLogs app. So I use very simple, GPS Tracks is the name of the app for the iPhone, and that is it's around about $5. Yeah, very good point, Scott. So need to as I demonstrated, you do need to synchronize times on your phone and with your camera for an accurate track log or an accurate, the location snapshot wouldn't be as critical, but for the track log. Also, keep in mind, if you're using multiple cameras, that you synchronize the times on each. So don't forget that side as well. So yeah, Lynn's question, does your phone have to be on the whole time or does it work in the background? So that GPS tracking will work. So even if your phone goes to sleep, as it were, as long as you don't completely shut it down, it will be recording. So you can start the recording, typically tap the power button to turn off the screen without shutting down the phone, put it in your backpack or pocket and continue on, and you'll be all set. And then don't forget to stop the track log recording. Not that it's such a big deal to get a track log that is, it doesn't have to be as small as possible. It's not a very large file, but you'll certainly wear down your battery if you forget to stop. And I've found usually I can get close to a full day, somewhere around 8 hours, but this will vary tremendously depending on which smartphone you're using and how fresh your battery is. And yeah, and we don't need, one of the questions that often comes up, and there's a couple variations on that being asked here, is, the accuracy of GPS. It is reasonably accurate, but as we saw earlier with the photo in the Alps, it's not perfectly accurate. And so I think of it as a really good reference, but don't take it too seriously. Don't bet your life on what the exact GPS coordinates were, but rather think of it as, usually pretty accurate. And most devices that I've worked with are pretty good about knowing when they have a good signal, a reliable signal. So there may be a degree of inaccuracy. And in the context of GPS, it's typically referred to as the distance accuracy. So the top is typically going to be around 3 meters. And so, you could be off by 3 meters, which can be somewhat significant depending on what you're trying to measure the location of. But there's more accuracy when there's more GPS satellite signals being picked up. And so there's sort of the minimum number that you need to get a location, and then you need an additional satellite or two to get elevation information. And so depending on how many signals you've been able to acquire from the GPS satellites that are hovering up there in geosynchronous orbit, that will vary significantly in terms of the accuracy. And so, yes, there are some cameras, and I couldn't tell you all of them, DSLR and mirrorless with built-in GPS. There's not a huge number of them, but I happen to be using a Canon 7D Mark II that has a built-in GPS receiver. I believe, if I remember correctly, it's the 5D that also has GPS. I've lost track of all the cameras that have GPS built in, but there are a handful, not a huge number of them, and we're starting to see more in the way of mirrorless and kind of the point and shoot that have the GPS built in. On the SLR side, there's only a handful of them. All right, and let's see. Oh, and yet, good common question, John. Yes, this session is absolutely being recorded, and and actually, great, Stephanie, I finally caught your note here about that mystery keyword. That's actually a good item to point out. So let's go back into in fact, let's go to the Italy, and that was 2013, just to make sure that we'll get the same. Well, actually, it was keyword set, now that I think about it. And so keyword set here is Rome, Italy. So that was the point of confusion. Thank you very much for clarifying that, because that's a great little note. So here I was talking about a photo captured in Florence, Italy, and Stephanie was noticing that there is Rome, Italy up there. What is going on? I thought it was Florence, not Rome. That is just a keyword set. Think of this as a little shortcut for being able to apply keywords more quickly. And so there's keyword suggestions where, based on photos that you've added keywords to recently, and if this photo has a matching keyword. So for example, this photo has Instagram share as a keyword assigned to it, and other photos that I've shared to Instagram have some of these other keywords. So for example, photos from a Rolling Stones concert in New Orleans have keywords associated with them as well. So the suggestions, sometimes they match up, sometimes they don't. The keyword sets, you can actually define your own sets. So there's a few options. There's outdoor photography built in. You can see the keywords associated with those, and portrait photography. And I had created a keyword set for Rome, Italy. And so if we go find a photo from Rome, there's one from Campo de Fiori. And so let's see if we've got any useful keywords there. Well, I have Rome and Italy already assigned, but if I go find, here's the Pantheon. So I could select a photo of the Pantheon, for example, and then just click on one of those keywords in the keyword set. So for example, Pantheon, to add that keyword. So that's the reason for that confusion. That is just a keyword set that happened to also be Italy when I was looking at a photo from Italy in a different location. All right, let's take a look and see if we've got some other questions. And I do want to point out, by the way, that we've just published a significant course, almost 6.5 hours of educational content on organizing photos in Lightroom Classic. It is part of the Mastering Adobe Lightroom Classic 10 bundle, which is in production right now, and you can actually pre-order and get a discount using this link here, timgray.me/classic10. Tim's indicating, another Tim, that the Canon 5D does not have GPS, so it must be the 1DX, perhaps? Don't quote me on that either, because I don't actually remember the specifics of which camera models actually have the built-in GPS, but I think it's a feature worth looking for. And as I mentioned, when if you're looking for something to put on your holiday list to buy yourself a present or to get somebody else to buy a gift for you, then I would say that's a good option. A camera with GPS built in, especially once we're able to travel more freely again, that will be wonderful. And one last thing I want to share: my next webinar presentation is going to cover planning for a full moon photo. And so at the end of December, there is a full moon, and it will be our last full moon of 2020. And so I thought it would be fun to have a presentation, a webinar presentation, talking about how you can plan for something like that, including figuring out a great location to photograph the full moon when it's rising or setting, for example, with a good foreground. So positioning the moon in the sky, figuring out where you need to be to get a good position of the moon in a good foreground setting, for example. And so the presentation, so the full moon is at the end of December. I want to give you plenty of time to put together some of the planning that I'm going to share with you. So the presentation will be on December 2nd. And so if you point your web browser at timgrey.me/webinar 2012-02, so that's 2020, December 02, that will direct you to the registration page. I'll include that link in a follow-up email as well when I share with you the recording of today's presentation, if you'd like to review some of those details. And so, again, thank you all very, very much. I know that I missed a couple of questions here, and there were some comments along the way. I'm going to try to get to as many of those questions. I'll try to cover some of those in upcoming editions of the Ask Tim Grey email newsletter. So I know we've gone a little bit over time, but thank you for joining me. Thank you for sticking around, and I'll hope to see you on December 2nd for that next presentation as part of the GreyLearning webinar series when I help you plan for a full moon photo. Thanks again.